Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone, and peace be upon you. I am Nurhan Mahmoudin, I'm part of the campaigns department, and I will be the moderator for today's panel discussion. I first of all would like to remind everyone, the viewers on YouTube and on Facebook, that we are in the middle of the 24th FEMYSO General Assembly. It's going really well, alhamdulillah. And I would also ask our dear viewers on Facebook and on YouTube to click on the share button to allow their friends to see this panel discussion and to benefit from it, inshallah. I am here with an amazing lineup of guest speakers. So we have, first of all, Ismail Cidic. He's the president of Bosnian Advocacy Center. And we also have Julie Pascoët from ENAR, Senior Advocacy Officer. And we also have Yasmine Ouirhrane, and she's an advocacy member at United Network of Young Peace Builders, and she was the Young European of the Year 2019. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for your time, and thank you for taking part of this. I'm gonna give you the floor to introduce yourselves and tell us who you are and what you do. We're gonna start with Ismail.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm really honored to take part in this year's FEMYSO's General Assembly. I was not able to make it last year, but it's really amazing to be here with you. I'm Ismail Cidic. I'm a graduate student at Duke University in the United States. I'm leading an organization called Bosnian Advocacy Center, which is an organization that advocates for Bosnian causes and interests in international media and foreign governments and international organizations. It is important for me to note here that although Bosnian Muslims consist mostly of what we know as Bosnians, today I'll be talking not as a president of the Bosnian Advocacy Center, but as an activist, as someone who participated in multiple campaigns, as someone who advocated for religious freedoms and Bosnian Muslims' causes and interests abroad. Looking forward to spend the next hour or so with all of you.
Thank you, Ismail. Let's go to Julie.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's been a while since I haven't had the chance to meet you all. At the beginning of my professional career, I had the honor to volunteer for FEMYSO, and it has been one of the most enriching experience I ever had, and I think it really built my confidence, my self-confidence. I had the honor to feel the trust, the caring, and the support of so many of you, and at such an important moment in my life. And really, FEMYSO gave me the opportunity to develop my skills on many levels. So this is quite, again, emotional for me because FEMYSO is one of my family. I've always felt this way. So I'm really thankful to be here today, and I wanted to say that and acknowledge that. So I'm Senior Advocacy Officer. I'm working at the Secretariat of the European Network Against Racism, which is a network of 150 anti-racist organizations, and FEMYSO is a member of ENAR, as you may know. So what I do is that I advise EU institutions when it comes to policies and legislation for more racial equality in Europe. And I also give my support and collaborate with many NGOs working on this issue across Europe to ensure their voices are heard. I've been leading ENAR's work on recognition of different forms of racism, including Islamophobia. I've worked in coalition of civil society with FEMYSO, especially working on Islamophobia and really increasing the institutional recognition of Islamophobia at the EU level. And I've also recently developed ENAR's work on intersectionality, how to better understand and operationalize the concepts at EU level, but also in some countries, and also on the work on National Action Plan Against Racism. So in order to improve laws and policies when it comes to tackling structural racism. So I'm really thankful again to be here, and I hope I can help also to also build your skills on advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your kind words. We're happy to have you here, Julie. And now we're gonna go to Yasmine.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everybody. Peace be upon you. I'm very happy to join you today and support your work at FEMYSO. And peace is the word that defines me. So if I have to introduce myself, I would say I'm an activist for peace. I'm a former member of the UNOI, United Network of Young Peace Builders, that I left in 2018 when I was appointed by the European Union and African Union as an expert on peace and security. So I've been working on drafting 6-7 projects with those two institutions, and with an allocated budget of 10 million euros. And we're currently monitoring and evaluating the implementation of those projects. So that's my main role. And then besides that, I'm also the co-founder of a very interesting platform that I think is relevant for each and every one of us, which is a platform called We Belong, and that spreads and shares the voice of the new daughters of Europe, how we call them, who are immigrants, daughters and immigrant descendants, living across Europe. So our goal is to spread more positive narratives and remind ourselves and the society that we belong to Europe. So this is about me.
Thank you all for the introductions. Again, I'm incredibly honored to moderate this hopefully fruitful conversation, inshallah. So today's topic is about Muslim youth and advocacy, the future of mindful activism in a post-COVID world. And as a Muslim community living in Europe, we are part of the wider society, and we need to be present. We need to be present in different levels of society. But nevertheless, we also do face some challenges. We face some great challenges that require work not only within our Muslim community, but also work with the institutions. And therefore, what we're going to talk about today is how the pandemic is affecting the work, is affecting the activism, is affecting the advocacy process. So our first question to all of you is why Muslim youth should feel the need to advocate for their rights in the first place? Why is this necessary? We're gonna go with Ismail, and then Julie, and then Yasmine.
Thank you. And I think my answer will serve as a good introduction for this question. So I think that before we can answer how to advocate, why, we need to talk about what to advocate for, frankly speaking. That the reality is that Muslim communities across Europe have not yet been able to come to an understanding of our common challenges and shared interests. So as one of the first, meaning first or second generations of Muslims with an experience of living in European multicultural societies, we were able to attain higher levels of education comparing to the generations of our parents or grandparents. But we also live in significantly better conditions and are able to travel, to exchange our views, to meet our peers, etc. But I think that we had not been able to capitalize on our individual experiences. For example, when we are talking about Islamophobia and labor conditions for Muslims, even as Muslim youth, we have not been able to create a cohesive and consistent message. And that same before COVID and during COVID, unfortunately. We even compete with each other as to the level of obstacles or victimization, rather than recognizing our common challenges and common issues. So in countries across Europe, as we know, there are multiple Muslim communities living side by side. So even as they are neighbors, these communities do not engage enough and work together enough, especially on social and political affairs, sometimes even religious affairs, I would say. So for example, I can say for Bosniak Muslim communities that we are, with some notable exceptions, not collaborating enough with other communities in European countries, but also we have not been asked to engage in any significant capacity. So that opens, I would say, another round of questions. So Muslims in the Balkans have been part of the European fabric for hundreds of years. Bosnian Muslims have arguably the most organized institutional structure of most European communities in Europe. And that's what even non-Muslims say, European officials, when talking about who to talk to in terms of policy proposals, in terms of decision making. In fact, one more example, we organize thousands of events on Islamophobia every year across Europe, yet there are many Muslims, and in some instances, even those who organize those events on Islamophobia, who can't name more than a single fact about the Bosnian genocide, which was one of the worst experiences of any Muslim communities in Europe. FEMYSO, for example, recognized that, and FEMYSO included Bosnian genocide and the promotion of what happened in Bosnia in the 1990s as one of the main principles. And I think, and I'll be talking about later on as well, that FEMYSO is the example, is a great platform to which we can use in order to promote our common causes and shared interests. What I'm saying is that Muslim youth in Europe cannot afford to remain in bubbles. And that's especially the case during COVID-19 pandemic, because we obviously do not know how long it will take until we are back to normal. And the second question is, what will the new normal look like? So we cannot afford ourselves to remain in those bubbles. As I said, FEMYSO is one of the best platforms where Muslim communities across Europe can get together, discuss the challenges, advocate for their causes. So there's a single voice, there's an umbrella organization that gathers different voices and advocate on behalf of those members. It is important also because the European officials, if you're talking about Europe in this specific example, know the specific address where to go in order to discuss decision-making, or in order to discuss policies. So it is all of this why we need to advocate. We understand the need. We need to work more on getting together and strengthen our common platforms. And I'm saying this because I believe that there is no advocacy without an understanding, a proper understanding of the facts on the ground. I also believe that there is no successful advocacy without understanding of our common challenges and shared interests. So it is upon the Muslim youth to recognize these important aspects and to exchange the views even more, cooperate much better. Let's use FEMYSO as one of the great examples on which we can build on and achieve our goals.
Thank you very much. Oh, I think that there is. Thank you much, Ismail. Julie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think this is starting very well. I mean, so many things that Ismail have mentioned I really relate to as an advocacy expert. I think especially in this time, I mean, what we have seen, of course, is nothing new, but the COVID crisis has, as we mentioned several times, exacerbated broader inequalities. They were already there, but now they are even like more blatant. And they have also shown to the world that people are affected by inequalities in the intersection of their identity. So you are affected because you are Muslim, but also because you are a woman, because you are a worker, etc. And I think this is even more, again, blatant than it used to be. More specifically on Islamophobia, which is, of course, the form of racism that is affected really specifically Muslim youth, and the fact that it's infringing Muslims' rights, and we see that it's an increasing phenomenon, that it's an increasing narrative, that it's becoming increasingly structural and institutional, meaning that the state is increasingly the main perpetrators of infringing the rights of Muslims, of spreading hate against Muslims. So this level, this increasing level, leave us no choice to actually engage in this fight, especially. And when I talk about structural and institutional form of Islamophobia, we see especially really worrying trends when it comes to counterterrorism policies and headscarf bans, specifically, and including when tackling affecting Muslim youth. But on a note of hope, what I've seen working with FEMYSO, working with Muslim youth in Europe, is how resilient youth, and especially Muslim youth, is. How their strength, especially, I have always been amazed and convinced that our spirituality is also giving us so much strength towards when we have to encounter and overcome obstacles. And also the fact that youth, and especially Muslim youth, cares so much for others, and not only related to their own condition as Muslim and to Islamophobia, but also broader. And this is really what we need, especially when it comes to the crisis, the COVID crisis. Really, this power of resilience and this power of caring for others is necessary for Europe today. Europe needs you more than ever, I would say. And definitely, Muslim young people are the hopes of Europe. I mean, even if we are hearing the contrary so many often, but I think it's this is really like, you are the change makers because you care, because you are solidar with others, and because you strive for justice, because you know what is to be injusticely treated. So definitely, I think, and especially when talking to you as the FEMYSO members, I know that you are also part of FEMYSO because you believe in Europe, you believe in the future of Europe, and you believe you can achieve something together. And that's really where I think FEMYSO needs to step up its advocacy efforts. Looking at what's happening, looking at what I mentioned at the beginning, and the severity of Islamophobia, the severity of inequalities, especially after this crisis, this is more than ever a need to actually increase your advocacy work. And I will mention some elements afterwards, but really, I think this should become one of your main activity, to say the least. And also to relate to what Ismail was saying, I really believe FEMYSO is one of the best platforms to for Muslim youth, but also for Muslims in general, to really advocate for Muslims' rights. And here also, I think FEMYSO is also a key platform to be able to work with other marginalized groups, as we have seen with the Black Lives Matter, but also with all the different inequalities that have like been exacerbating during the crisis. We see that it's more than ever important to build alliances. And I really believe also that this is a place to be for FEMYSO, to actually increasingly work on that. I know you are already doing it, but I think it's more than ever also important to actually raise and step up your engagement on that.
Right now, we are going to hear Yasmine's answer about the first question, which I'm going to repeat to all of you right now. And that is why Muslim youth should feel the need to advocate for their rights in Europe. So Yasmine, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm also very inspired by the remarks from Ismail and Julie. I think you covered so many important topics that range from plurality of thought as Muslims, or also as, you know, plurality of belief, and also our individuality, but on the same time facing common challenges all across Europe, which can just mention that the anti-Muslim hatred raised just in 2018 by 74%, according to European Islamophobia report. And so we see difficulties and struggles that we go through as Muslims, but on the same time, there is also singular and important episode that we need to remember. I just want to mention the genocide of Srebrenica, as Ismail mentioned. It's the worst massacre since the end of the Second World War, and nobody acknowledges it in Europe the way we should. And I mean in history books. I personally had the chance to study in France and Italy, and I wish we spoke more about this. At the same time, as Muslims, we also see the worst genocide occurring right now in China, targeting Muslim, which is the Uyghur population, the minority in China that is target of hate. So, and you know, they are being interned in concentration camps and forced to torture and labor. So remembering this means that, you know, people that just share the same belief as us are often the target of hate and violence, and sometimes of genocides. And so this is just the first, for me, the first motivation that I have to remembering that I have a duty, but also as a human. My personal beliefs and our personal beliefs, I think they teach us the importance for justice and bringing justice and equality in our society. And so this is what motivates me personally, and I hope that it will motivate you too. And of course, as Julie said, we are an intersection of different elements that shape us in society. And so when I am a Muslim person, and on top of that, I'm a woman, and on top of that, I'm under 30, and on top of that, I come from an underprivileged background because one of my parents or both my parents are immigrants, then of course I will be facing particular and very specific realities that other will not. And my question is, how can I turn these problems into solutions? And that's what I always try to do, and I motivate you to do it, to move from this constatation of the problem or the problems, what they are, to then acknowledging it and being like, what can I do out of this? And so this is the main focus that I carry on my advocacy work, and I think it might be useful for many of you. That's it.
Thank you, Yasmine, and thank you, everyone. Great remarks, great answers, and I feel like that as a Muslim community, but as simply European citizens, we already had different challenges, right? And even after the pandemic, these challenges may have changed and may have even become more. And that is, I think, a perfect bridge to our next question, which is, like, the global pandemic has clearly shaken the world in a number of different ways. And taking into consideration the current situation, what do you think, in your opinion, are the key priorities that should be included in our advocacy agenda as young Muslims? And this time I'm gonna go with Yasmine, and then Julie, and then Ismail, because you were last. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So COVID-19 was, 2020 was a tough year, right? It allowed us to understand the importance of freedom, but also we were exposed to, new, to adapting in a new way of life. And for me, as we started We Belong, just on the eve of the lockdown, it was a challenge to work remotely, and it is for all of us. On the same time, we see growing inequalities that will impact us as youth in the next few years. And again, this intersection of elements can also be another, difficulty into finding a job later for us. But at the same time, I think it is also a great opportunity, as we saw with the tragic death of George Floyd in the United States, and the global social and racial justice uprising across the world. Also led to, first of all, a acknowledgement of our struggles as minorities in Europe, but also a recognition at the institutional level. And we saw the resolution put forward by the European Parliament asking, on anti-racism, and then followed up by the European Commission with an action plan. I'm sure Julie will be able to speak about it more because you work on this also, right? But for me, it's not enough, but I think it's already a very great and first step when we think that in our institutions we're still so much underrepresented as minorities. And when I say minorities, I mean ethnic and religious minorities. So I think we're going in the right direction, and sometimes challenges bring also opportunities, and that's how I keep saying it, because I still need to be positive in order to continue my advocacy work, and I hope we will all do. But on the same time, continuing to acknowledging that after a crisis, there will be challenges that we will be facing, and we will, as Muslim people, as minorities, as this intersection of discrimination, we will be the main affected, especially as young women, for me. Yeah.
Thank you, Yasmine. I'm gonna pass the floor to Julie. Please make your answers fit 3 minutes, because we do have all the answers as well. So Julie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So on this question, I wanted first to not only look at the advocacy content elements, like the kind of topics or that you would like to have in your advocacy agenda. Why? Because you can have the best advocacy agenda if you don't have some of the conditions in order to carry out the advocacy agenda, then you won't achieve anything. And that this is also what I've learned through my work at ENAR and my experience. So I wanted to share that with you. And I wanted to highlight 3 elements, which are first to invest more resources to be actually more engaged in advocacy, to work in coalitions, and to stay true to your convictions and to justice. First, on resources. I think Ismail was referring to that, is that there really needs to be more engagement from organizations working on Islamophobia, from Muslim organizations, to actually do concrete advocacy work at European and national level. Because from what I see, also working at European level, having initiated the European Coalition Against Islamophobia with other NGOs, I see that Muslims and NGOs that are representing them are still not enough in relation with their decision makers. They are not enough talking to them on issues that are actually affecting them. They are not enough raising their voices and their opinions, submitting key specific expertise positions on the issue based on what we know on the facts, but also, as Yasmine was saying, what kind of solutions we want to see in terms of policy making in order to avoid discrimination against Muslims. And here I see there is really a lack of engagement, a lack of resources, and we need to really invest more in that by maybe like trying to seek more funding to actually fund advocacy persons or advocacy departments in order really to invest in the long term on that, because also the long term is very important. The fact that it should be sustainable is very important. Sometimes I see projects, and this is also the problem with a call for projects. These are really like short projects that are really limited in time, and we cannot really use their full potential. And sometimes the problem I see is that it's too much focused on reports, on trainings. It's good. It's needed to build the expertise, to build the skills, but we also need in the long term really like resources for advocacy. And here I think we still need to work on that. The second element on coalitions, what I've seen also that is really crucial, especially in this time of COVID, as we were saying, is to work in coalition with organizations working on similar issues or on broader justice issues. It's really important to take time to build relationships with organizations, to build common strategy with organizations. We cannot afford to work alone. And I think also Ismail was referring to the bubbles. We cannot afford that, especially in this time, as we mentioned. Especially and even more when it comes to Muslim organizations, especially when we are so much demonized as Muslim organizations, as Muslim activists, we need to be in coalition. We need to build alliances and take time to build alliances. So it's not just, in order to build relationships and good work, you need to invest time in this. And also not go into some issues or some campaign without having talked or without having shared with organizations that might have done similar work. Because what I've seen as well is that sometimes we are trying to reinvent the wheel and not learn from what has already been done. And I think, of course, we can have a different perspective, we can have a different way of doing things, but I think we need to learn from what has already been done. We need also to ensure we connect and we share expertise with people who are working on same issues. It's very crucial, and it can only be enriching. Sometimes, indeed, it's taking more time. And this is what, when you build coalition, it might take more time at the beginning, but then it's really an investment that will, in the future, also support your work and really increase your resilience and your impact. Because, we need also to avoid competition, as it was said. I also sometimes see a lot of efforts to actually demonize similar organization or trying to destroy other organization reputation. And I think we shouldn't waste our time on that. Okay. Of course, we don't always agree when it comes to the organization strategies and the positioning. We don't always agree, but I think we need to understand also we have common enemies, if I can say it like that, and they have much more impact on our lives than maybe other organizations that are trying to do similar work. So I think here also we need to be cautious, really not to spend time to actually try to undermine other organizations. Okay, and the third element is really quickly.
20 seconds to wrap up.
What?
20 seconds to wrap up your answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the third element that is very important for me is the fact that to stay true to your conviction and to justice, because I've seen as well that with advocacy, you come close to power, you come close to influence, and you can lose sight of your call for justice. Especially as Muslims, we lack recognitions, we lack justice, we are striving for justice. And we have so much also, we have in the narrative, in the discourse, we are always being asked to deny part of our identity to be recognized, to be accepted, especially by people in power. I think we should be really cautious to stay true to our conviction or injustice, and to not be like attracted by what power is expecting from us, not to betray our communities to access to some kind of recognition or power. I think this is very crucial. And again, one way to avoid that is also to work in coalition, in big, strong alliances. So these are my third points, and I can develop more elements afterwards.
Thank you very much, Julian. I'm sorry that I have to remind you about the time, but it's because there are other questions as well. And we would like to hear your answers on that as well. So I'm gonna pass the floor to Ismail. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So I think even before this crisis, we lack maturity in social and political stances. And to build on Julie's point, we have not been able to create a cohesive agenda, let's say, even before these challenges. So what I really hope is that this situation does not weaken us further and distance ourselves from each other. I hope we will be able to look at the bigger picture. And look, we have what I like to call a poverty of knowledge, especially of historical knowledge, and connections among our youth. The post-COVID-19 world could potentially pose a challenge to mobility. So even our cross-cultural exchanges, even our trips that had begun more common are now in danger of being more limited. We witnessed that businesses and universities are already announcing more remote programs after COVID-19. And I think that's something we should not be doing in order for us to advocate well, especially the biggest stages. So I would say that platforms such as FEMYSO would need to work much more, and that includes our work as well. On the other side, I do not think that our collective challenges will be changed that much. Same or similar advocacy topics, meaning primarily discrimination, primarily Islamophobia, will continue to be dominant. We will still face these issues. We will still advocate for our causes and interests within those frameworks. However, as I noted, I do hope that we will not go several steps back, but instead several steps ahead. Crises pose a threat, but also an opportunity for those who know how to use them. And let's be amongst those who use the crisis. So if I am to make 3 points that we should be doing starting from today, it's insist on all forms of communication. This crisis simply cannot, and we cannot afford to distance ourselves during this crisis and in post-COVID-19 world. Secondly, insist on all in-person meetings when possible, of course, especially after COVID-19 crisis. And third, empower ourselves technologically and digitally during this period. So in order for us to advocate better, let's use this time to learn more about tools through which we can promote our causes. Because as I said, the issues will remain more or less similar. But at the same time, this crisis is potentially a great opportunity for us to develop even better models on how we can further promote our causes.
Thank you very much, Ismail. Thank you, Julie and Yasmine, for your answers. So my understanding, one thing that I've got from your answers is that as a Muslim community and also like in Muslim organizations, what we do is that we identify the problem, but maybe we don't do a really good job on identifying the good methodology to assess the problem. So with that being said, is what I would like to ask is, what is the correct methodology in your opinion? So, and specifically in a post-COVID world, and with the uncertainty that was created with this pandemic, how should young Muslims engage in a post-COVID-19 world? And if I would like also to ask if there are good practices and bad practices, also still referring to the general concept of mindful activism. We're gonna start with Ismail, as you were last, go to Julie, and then Yasmine.
So as I said, I do not think that different topics would dominate our advocacy agenda in the future, in the post-COVID-19 world. I think that we are still facing, and we will be facing more or less the same challenges. I would not agree that we also know how to properly identify the problem. I would say that's the core of an issue why we are not able to properly advocate. So as I said, we need to get together. We need to open ourselves. We need to share our stories. One aspect that this crisis poses is that, and threat, frankly speaking, is that we are potentially distancing ourselves. We cannot afford it, as I know. We cannot afford to further distance ourselves. So in order for us to identify the problem, we need to communicate more. In order for us to identify the problem, we need to get together. We need to share our stories. And if this crisis manages to divide us further or to distance ourselves, we will not be able even to develop a proper methodology, because we will not be able to understand what our core problems are. I think, as I noted, we need to insist absolutely on communication in all sense. We need to insist on physical meetings when we can, because let's think about it. How do we learn most about each other during conferences or during assemblies? It is not those sessions that we listen to moderators, that we listen to speakers. It is those 5-minute chats before the beginning of a session that brings us together, that we manage to understand our peers, our colleagues. It is those lunch breaks that we are able to discuss our stories, our common issues, much better than the sessions themselves. So that is why I keep insisting that whenever we can, we should be and we must insist on connections in all ways possible.
Thank you, Ismail. Going to Julie now. So Julie, how do you think that young Muslim activists should engage in a post-COVID-19 world?
So to build on what I've already mentioned, I think what is very also, and I agree with Ismail that there is nothing new, but definitely the intersections of discrimination is even more blatant. And I think also for FEMYSO specifically, how do we ensure that we work? So I think there are two things. We work on specific issues that are specific for the Muslim community, so like Islamophobia, but also how do we mainstream our issues in broader policies? And I think what FEMYSO is doing, for example, in youth policies is very good, because this is really a way to ensure that our issues are also recognized in these broader policies, whereas before we were kind of forgotten and invisible. And here you can say that youth policy also need to address the issue of Muslim youth. So I think this is definitely something you should really keep, because I think this is one strength of FEMYSO related to that. And on intersectional approach also to the issues, I think how this is also a question for a network or for any organization. How do we ensure diversity of identities in our network in order to ensure that when we advocate for example, for Muslim youth or for youth, we have a good representation of the plurality of Muslim youth, of the diversity of Muslim youth. And here also, this is maybe something on which FEMYSO is engaging or should maybe be more engaged in. How do we build this diversity inside our network? This is also something ENAR is questioning itself about. I also wanted to say that, and more generally also on advocacy, I think what we have seen, especially with the crisis, especially with the Black Lives Matter, and also what we have seen at the EU level, that the EU decision makers responded with this EU anti-racism action plan. There are really two elements there that have allowed us to move forward, is thanks to the mobilization in the streets, thanks to the mobilization of grassroots movements, but also the advocacy part, meaning that some organizations were ready to provide very concrete and specific solutions. And I think the two needs to go together. You need to have a plan. I mean, there is a chaos, a kind of crisis, but then we need to build and to build in our constituencies solutions. So as ENAR, for example, there was this mobilization, and we had already worked on so many recommendations on equality data collection, on national action plan against racism, on how to define structural racism, how to define intersectionality. We had built on these different issues for some years already, and specific forms of racism as well. We had this on some throughout the years. And this moment of mobilization of organization also opened an opportunity. And finally, decision makers were hearing what we had been saying for so many years, thanks to this mobilization in the street. And then we managed to bring our solutions. And there they actually listened to us. It's true, it's not perfect, this plan, but it's a kind of really a breakthrough for racial equality in Europe. It's the first time that there is this level of recognition of structural and institutional forms of racism. And really, like, so many recommendations we had made are finally in this text, like maybe sometimes it's even word by word. So I think it's not to say that this paper will solve anything, of course. And here again, we need to continue mobilizing, we need to continue to engage in these policies. But this is to show you that when also we need to be prepared to have a plan in this terms of chaos. And maybe I can use the opportunity also to answer to Hande's question on the chat related to my comment on sustainability of sustainable strategy in advocacy. It's true that you need also to build this, you need reports, you need trainings, and actually also, but this should be in parallel with also a more like long-term resources for advocacy. And maybe it's also because of the way funding is structured at EU level, and all the funding to which FEMYSO has access is structured based on project, and it's problematic because it's not allowing you to invest sustainably on advocacy. But maybe you need to think on how, for example, to recruit some people that will be able to work on building an advocacy strategy for several years, in parallel also with building this capacity, which is also crucial.
Thank you very much, Julie. So I am just gonna go to Yasmine to hear her answer.
Thank you. We'll try to keep it short. So in terms of mindful advocacy, I can't help but say that partnership is crucial, and that's what I learned throughout my short advocacy experience compared to the other panelists. But basically, I think that, you know, when I was 16, and just giving you this concrete example, I decided to practice Islam, which I discovered when I came to France, living in France from Italy. So when I arrived in France, I was I witnessed a new society where my points of view or my beliefs would be seen in a different way compared to Italy. And so I had to adapt. And throughout my advocacy work since I was 16, so since I started to advocate first at the local level and then more internationally, I always avoided labeling myself as a Muslim person representing older Muslims. For me, it was more having another strategy of another approach, and that's why I would encourage you to suggest new way to partner and getting into new spheres by also mentioning that you are just a person advocating, and that's what I did honestly and personally. And then this, in the first place, allowed me to get into some spheres that I would never maybe have access if I label myself as Muslim, just because there is this stigma of, you know, confusion between what a Muslim is and the views or the political and social issues that we would cover. For me, we can be Muslim and advocate for environment, for social justice, for a range of issues that concern all the planet, right? So it is important to remind ourselves, but also others, about this, I would say. And in terms of finding new approaches, I try to change things from within. That's what I try to do. Of course, the minute I was put on the spotlight because of this award I was given, I was the target of hate and Islamophobia by hundreds of people, right? And when Marine Le Pen attacked me on social media, I had the choice to go on media, and I had many opportunities to go on media and denounce this and give her many votes because it was under the European elections, or to just, you know, build a long-term strategy and an advocacy strategy where I would not only denounce this, but also try to prevent this by fostering new solutions again. So instead of focusing on the problem, which we know it is a problem, the minute a Muslim woman wearing a veil goes on the public spheres, she is the target of hate, at least in France, that's the case for me. And so I decided to have another approach. And up till now, because I didn't seize that opportunity to denounce on the short term that thing that would just have the buzz on social media and on the internet and on media, I decided to then continue my work behind the scenes. And up till now, alhamdulillah, I was given many opportunities that probably I would not have given if I decided to speak on the first place. So always thinking of, is it, of course, media and politics, they have it's different powers, but they say the media are sometimes more powerful, but choosing how to spread our message and what is our message, it's so important. Do we want to focus on the fact that there is Islamophobia, or do we want to provide solutions to prevent this Islamophobia? And I joined the points that Judy raised on this. So this is it.
Thank you very much, Yasmine. You have mentioned a really, really important point. That is the object of one of our last questions, and that is defamation, because a lot of our activists, a lot of young Muslim activists are being targeted by media outlets, newspapers, journalists, politicians even, and that was your case. So my question for the three of you is, have you ever, you already talked about it, Yasmine, but maybe let's hear also Julian, Ismail, if they've ever had any experience of them being targeted because they are Muslim activists, and what is their advice to young Muslims who are being constantly targeted by politicians or newspapers and so on, and what would you suggest them to, how would they behave, how should they behave? So let's start with Ismail, and let's go to Julie, and afterwards maybe go back to you, Yasmine.
So as soon as those politicians, as soon as those media outlets target you, mention your name, you've been given a platform on which you can appear and you can send your messages. That's why it is incredibly important to use our free time, and as Hande mentioned in the comments, to name a specific solution, to invest in our technological, digital and other types of upskilling. This is important because we never know when we will be given an opportunity like this, but also because of our long-term goals. So in order for us to advocate for our causes and interests, we need to understand the tools. The reality is that we have never been able to have this amount of tools ever. The Muslim youth have never been able to have this amount of tools available for free. So with the rise of far right, there will be more cases in which we will be attacked as Muslims, as Muslim activists, in many instances. So it is upon us to prepare ourselves, to get ready for those opportunities and to use them in our favor. Why I'm so certain we can use them in our favor, it is because we are not spreading hate. We have a clear messaging. We are hiding nothing. We have an honest and clear message of peace, message of tolerance. And with that kind of message, you can only win people. You cannot lose people. How you can lose people if you do not use the platforms, do not use the tools. So to name a specific solution, as I mentioned in my answer on my second question, we need to invest and use this time to invest in upskilling, especially in terms of technology, especially in terms of digital media. As I said, we never know when we will be able to speak out, when our politicians or other far-right activists attack us. But that is also important for our long-term strategy, and we should not be relying only on platforms when far-right activists or politicians attack us or give us some free space in the media. We need to work parallel on that.
Thank you very much, Ismail, for your answer. Julie?
So my experience has been a bit different because it has been much more subtle and not maybe public. But for example, just to share a very concrete and example of how have been, because I'm an advocate against Islamophobia in Belgium, in Europe, and how I have been impacted. So I'm a French citizen. I have asked for the Belgian citizenship because I have my family here now. I have children, and I wanted to, to have all my rights here. And I've asked for the Belgian citizenship, but I've been like they refused to give it to me because on the argument that I was a dangerous Muslim advocate from the Muslim Brotherhood, etc. So all the different arguments. And I had to go to court, etc., and it's still not fixed. So I think it's showing also how it can be public and related to hate speech and violent hate speech, but also how Islamophobia is really structural and having an impact on many aspects of your life, even on really your rights. And here, I think some of the strategies. I think we all mentioned some of them already, but it's true that, and related to one of the questions, it's true that the far right narrative we have the impression it's increasing. I mean, the violence is increasing. We can see that, but at the same time, I see that new alliances are being made. New alliances outside of the Muslim community sphere. including on the issue of Islamophobia. So this also is quite, gives hope. And I think one of the reasons and also the strategy to continue developing is to increase the understanding of the issue of Islamophobia and its structural dimension and how it's connected to the broader issue of racism. And I think this is also really key, because as ENAR, we have worked a lot on the recognition of specific forms of racism, but at some point we also were a bit concerned that we shouldn't isolate the specific forms of racism. We should ensure that the common oppression framework is still understood and there are still links made among them. And I think here this is very key, increased understanding, mainstreaming of the issue, as you are doing in youth policies, as we are trying to do in economic policies, in artificial intelligence policies. This is really key. Like, how do we ensure that in different broader policies, we also acknowledge that there may be a negative impact on Muslims? And this, we need to engage again on these policies, also on counterterrorism policies, etc. And build partnerships also is key, because then you have also like organizations that are not related to the Muslim communities, but like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, etc., who also are there to support and to better understand and to support and to advocate for Muslim rights, and you are not you are not alone then. And I think we shouldn't disconnect our issue to broader struggles like environmental issues, like economic inequalities issues, social issues, etc. We always need to connect our issues to that, because it's also helping us to have people working in this field to understand our issues, because it's the same basis and the same roots.
Thank you very much, Julie. Now let's go quickly to Yasmine. And after her answer, we're going to go through some questions that we received from Facebook.
Yeah. So I already said what happened, but to give you concrete tools and concrete advice based on my experience is take a lawyer. Like, I was very lucky. The minute I was the target of these hate and threats and death threats, I got some people telling me, Yasmine, don't reply, just take first a lawyer, because the minute you tweet, every tweet I would put or out there, or everything I would say would go on an article. And then I would get many calls from media. And you can go and talk, but the minute you say one word wrong, this prevents you from then taking this case to court and having chances to win it. So I decided to stay silent for at least a few weeks. And I took this lawyer, and now we are waiting for the process after a year. But for me, it's important to know that you have this right, this legal right to be protected. Of course, it's a long process and longer than just go on TV and denounce it. But also, especially, think strategically. Like, for me, literally, if I had gone on the TV on the eve of the European elections, Marine Le Pen would have got so many votes. And also I would have got so much more hate than I did. And it was very, painful for a person, for an activist. So be surrounded by people that support you, and know that if you're getting attacked by, big far-right people, is that you're doing the right things. At least you are seen as, somebody to target. Which makes you also vulnerable, but on the same time, your voice is important at this time. And on the same time, make sure that you have legal support, that you advocate also, as Julie said, for those social media companies to protect you. Because today and up till now, I get threats, but I can't block the accounts, just because even though you report, it's a very long process before Facebook, Google, or Twitter, or other companies take into account your request. So we need to make sure that more tools are set to protect citizens, also while guaranteeing the freedom of speech. But at the same time, when it threatens your life and you're afraid that somebody can come and just harm you, it is important that you take legal steps to get protection. So this is it for me.
Thank you very much, Yasmine, and thank you to Julie and Ismail as well. We have received a couple of questions from Facebook. So, and because because of the sake of the time, I'm not gonna make each of you answer to the question. So we have a question to Ismail from Facebook, from Samar Hashish. She's saying, I think one of the things that we as Muslims really need now is to be united in the front. However, I think that this is one of our bigger challenges. How would you propose we overcome this challenge? This is a question for Ismail.
So as I noted in my first answer, incredibly fundamentally important for us to get together and share our stories, share our experiences with the COVID-19 that might be slightly disruptive, but we must not allow this to remain so in the following years. In order for us to get united, to get a united message, we need to share our individual messages. Unfortunately, we live in that type of a world where I, as a Bosnian who is let's speak in terms of how far right speaks, like who is white, who does not look any different than them, I am fortunate to not go through same challenges and same experiences as hijabi women, as people of color. But I'm posing question for myself. Should I stay on the sidelines and allow other more vulnerable groups of Muslims to suffer, or should I also raise my voice? Should I also engage in advocacy activities? Should I share my stories? Should I listen to the stories of other Muslims? So it is incredibly important for us, as I said, to first to understand how to listen to the experiences of others, and then also to properly present our stories. We should not be in challenge. We should not challenge ourselves. Who is more vulnerable? Who is more challenged? Who is more attacked? If we continue to do so, we will never be able to achieve any successes on a much bigger platforms and a much bigger scenes. Instead, we should combine those experiences and address it in a united way. But in order to do so, we need to understand how to listen. We need to speak up. We need to get involved. We need to get together, and hopefully we'll be able to do so.
Thank you very much, Ismail, for your answer. Apparently, we do have also another question to Julie from Facebook as well. Julie, you mentioned the youth need to invest in tools and resources for advocacy. Can you give some examples or some success stories?
Can you repeat the first part of the question, please?
So they are saying you have mentioned that youth need to invest in tools and resources for advocacy. Could you give some examples of the kind of resources, also like success stories?
So I think I mentioned also that I was mentioning specifically about how organization can recruit specific persons to work on advocacy strategies, more long-term advocacy strategies. For example, I can give the example of the European Forum of Muslim Women. For example, they also struggled with resources, but at some point they decided to hire someone really focusing on advocacy. And we could really see a change in, at least at the Brussels level, that there was an increasing engagement of this network of voices of Muslim women in different policy circles, and it has helped a lot. And this is one of the key specific solution I would see, like really to hire people working only on that.
Thank you very much, Julie, for your remarks. I think that we have reached the end of our conversation and the end of our panel discussion. First of all, I would like to thank our panelists, Julie from ENAR, Ismail, Cidic, and also Yasmine Ouirhrane. It has been an amazing experience, an amazing discussion. I hope it's going to be beneficial for the people that have watched the discussion. And with that, yes, we are concluding. Thank you very much again, and have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.